For an entire generation of fans, The Phantom Menace was the first journey into the Star Wars universe. Whether it was watching Anakin race through the deserts of Tatooine, seeing Darth Maul ignite his double-bladed lightsaber, or witnessing the Jedi Council for the very first time, these moments became unforgettable. But behind those childhood memories lies an incredible story of filmmaking innovation. So let's take a look at how some of the movie's biggest scenes were actually created. While massive action sequences like the Naboo battle, the pod race, and Darth Maul's duel often steal the spotlight, some of the most important moments in The Phantom Menace actually take place inside the Jedi Temple. And at the center of those scenes stands the Jedi Order's wisest and most respected master, Yoda. Whether he's questioning young Anakin Skywalker before the Jedi Council, or speaking with Obi-Wan Kenobi following Qui-Gon Jinn's death, Yoda feels completely natural on screen. What many fans don't realize, however, is that the original 1999 version of the film did not use a fully CGI Yoda. Despite the fact that characters like Jar Jar Binks were already being created digitally, George Lucas chose a different approach for Yoda. Unlike many creatures in the film, Yoda was a dialogue-heavy character, whose facial expressions and emotional reactions were critical to the story. Because of this, Lucas and his team believed that a practical puppet would provide a stronger on-set presence and allow actors to interact with him more naturally. To achieve this, the creature effects team built an incredibly detailed Yoda puppet using foam latex, silicone components, and sophisticated mechanical systems hidden inside the figure. The puppet contained dozens of moving parts, capable of controlling the eyes, eyebrows, ears, mouth, and subtle facial expressions. Bringing Yoda to life required an entire team of performers working in perfect synchronization. Legendary puppeteer Frank Oz provided Yoda's voice and controlled many of the facial movements, while additional puppeteers operated the head, eyes, ears, and body mechanics. Although audiences only saw a single character on screen, several people were often working together behind the camera to create every movement. One of the biggest technical challenges came during the film's editing, when Yoda walks alongside Obi-Wan through the halls of the Jedi Temple. Creating believable walking motion with a puppet was far more difficult than simply having him sit and speak. To solve this problem, the filmmakers combined practical puppetry with digital enhancements in certain shots. Some moments used the physical puppet directly, while others incorporated digital assistance and movement references to make Yoda's walk appear smoother and more natural. The result was a seamless blend of old-school craftsmanship and emerging digital technology, a perfect example of how The Phantom Menace bridged two generations of filmmaking techniques. The Boonta Eve classic pod race remains one of the most ambitious action sequences ever created for a science fiction film. Even today, the scale, speed, and energy of the race are incredibly impressive, but behind the scenes, this sequence was the result of an extraordinary combination of miniatures, real-world photography, practical effects, and cutting-edge CGI. To create the massive pod race arena, Industrial Light and Magic constructed a huge miniature stadium packed with tiny spectators and intricate architectural details. Rather than relying entirely on computer graphics, the filmmakers used physical models so that natural lighting, shadows, and textures would behave realistically on camera. For the endless deserts and canyon landscapes seen throughout the race, the production team traveled to Tunisia, where they filmed real desert environments. These practical background plates were later combined with digital pod racers, dust clouds, and visual effects, helping the race feel grounded in a believable physical world. Because the racers needed to travel at extreme speeds approaching hundreds of kilometers per hour, the actual racing vehicles seen on screen were fully CGI. Traditional miniature photography simply couldn't achieve the complex camera movements and high-speed action required. However, whenever a pod racer exploded or crashed into canyon walls, ILM often filmed real miniature explosions in the studio and composited those practical fireballs into the digital footage. This combination gave the destruction a much more realistic appearance than CGI alone could provide. Some of the most convincing moments in the pod race aren't the wide shots, they're the close-ups inside Anakin's cockpit. For these scenes, the production team built a full-scale practical pod racer cockpit, mounted on a large hydraulic motion platform known as a gimbal. Whenever Anakin's pod turned sharply, hit turbulence, or narrowly avoided obstacles, crew members physically tilted and shook the cockpit to simulate the movement. As a result, actor Jake Lloyd wasn't simply pretending to react, he was actually feeling the vibrations and sudden motions, which made his performance look far more authentic. Large blue screen backdrops surrounded the cockpit set, allowing ILM to later replace the background with the fast-moving digital canyons seen in the finished film. The climactic lightsaber duel between Darth Maul, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi isn't just one of the highlights of The Phantom Menace, it's widely considered one of the greatest lightsaber battles in the entire Star Wars saga. Known to fans as the legendary Duel of the Fates, this sequence completely redefined what a Jedi versus Sith confrontation could look like on screen. But creating that iconic battle required months of preparation, intense physical training, complex choreography, practical set construction, and advanced visual effects. One of George Lucas's smartest decisions was casting martial arts expert Ray Park as Darth Maul. Park's background in wushu and competitive martial arts gave him extraordinary speed, flexibility, and precision. Fight coordinator Nick Gillard designed an entirely new fighting style around those abilities, blending martial arts, sword combat, acrobatics, and staff techniques into something audiences had never seen before in Star Wars. Many of Darth Maul's fastest spins, kicks, and aggressive attacks were performed by Ray Park himself, helping the character feel genuinely dangerous and unpredictable. Before filming began, Ray Park, Liam Neeson, and Ewan McGregor spent weeks rehearsing together. Every strike, block, step, and movement was practiced repeatedly until the choreography became second nature. Behind-the-scenes footage shows the actors training like dancers, carefully memorizing each sequence so the duel could be performed safely at full speed. The fight itself takes place inside Naboo's massive power generator complex. While the location appears enormous on screen, much of what audiences see was actually a combination of practical set and CGI extensions. The walkways, platforms, corridors, and energy barrier sections were physically built, allowing the actors to perform real choreography in a tangible environment. The most ambitious alien character in the film was undoubtedly Jar Jar Binks. Today, fully digital characters are common, but at the time, Jar Jar represented one of the most advanced visual effects achievements ever attempted. To bring the character to life, actor Ahmed Best physically performed every scene on set. During filming, he wore a special reference costume and often carried a head-mounted extension that indicated where Jar Jar's eyes and face would eventually appear. This allowed actors like Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor to maintain proper eye contact and interact naturally with a character that didn't yet exist visually. Once filming was completed, ILM artists studied Ahmed Best's movements, body language, timing, and performance before building the final digital Jar Jar around his acting. Although audiences saw a fully CGI character, every gesture and movement originated from a real performer. Another fascinating example of this practical and digital approach can be seen aboard the massive Trade Federation droid control ship. In the finished film, the ship feels enormous, cold, and almost industrial in its design. To create this environment, the filmmakers used a hybrid combination of practical sets and blue screen technology. The bridge itself, including the command chairs, control consoles, railings, and walkways, was physically built on stage. These real sets allowed actors to move naturally through the environment, while providing realistic lighting and reflections on the Neimoidian costumes and masks. However, the practical set only extended a limited distance. Beyond those physical structures, nearly everything else was created digitally. Blue screens surrounded much of the stage, allowing ILM to later add endless corridors, giant hangars, distant control rooms, starfield space views, and thousands of CGI battle droids operating throughout the ship. When designing Anakin Skywalker's home, the filmmakers deliberately avoided creating a futuristic science fiction house. Instead, they wanted the audience to feel that Anakin lived in a remote and isolated corner of the galaxy, where daily life revolved around survival. To achieve this, the production designers studied traditional North African and Berber architecture. They observed how desert communities used thick walls, rounded shapes, and earth-tone structures to protect themselves from intense heat and sandstorms. These real-world design principles became the foundation for Anakin's home and the overall visual style of Mos Espa. Much of Anakin's neighborhood was inspired by actual historical buildings found throughout Tunisia. Existing structures were modified and enhanced with subtle science fiction details, creating the illusion that these homes had stood for generations under Tatooine's unforgiving conditions. If you enjoyed this behind-the-scenes journey through The Phantom Menace, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.